Hello, folks. I'm Katie.
I'm Vinny, and this is Learn Real Good.
Whoa, we're back.
We're back.
We're back, baby.
We never left.
At these microphones, week after week.
We're just sitting here waiting for
waiting
for another episode to start.
Yes, we just set our clock 1 week from today, and then that week surpasses. When that week passes,
yeah, that we surpass each week
with another recording.
That's right.
Yes. It's not the most fulfilling life sitting here
waiting.
We
could do other things,
but I don't want to miss it. I don't want to get up, go to the bathroom, and then we miss our recording slot.
Right.
You know.
Well, I don't want to wait for my life to be over.
Okay, Paula Cole. So what have you been up to, Vinny? What's new?
What is new?
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? Weather's turning colder. It's getting chilly, so mostly just getting into flannel. Yes, you like to be wrapped in flannel. Yeah, just like a little burrito. Put me in flannel sheets,
clothes, flannel sheets.
Yep, flannel hats, everything flannel.
With a lot of friction.
A lot of friction, but friction's what keeps us warm.
Hey, interesting.
Yeah, how about you, Katie?
Friction makes me think of, I remember an early science fair project my brother did was to have race cars on a ramp with different materials, and he measured like how fast they would travel to see like friction.
Nice.
On like carpet, sandpaper.
Why did you say it like that?
I don't know. He was a kid. That's my kid voice.
All right.
He didn't do this as an adult. This is a child science fair project.
I would do that as an adult, no problem.
I remember thinking it was so cool, and I couldn't get, because I'm younger, I couldn't get over like, whoa, they do travel differently.
Amazing. That's great. That's a good science fair project.
Friction. How does that work?
How does it work?
Yeah. Fun fact. My earliest science fair project was making the same recipe for cakes with -1 ingredient each time to see how it affected the cake.
How many cakes did you end up making?
Several. They're all mini cakes.
Okay, like cupcakes.
Yes, but they were like pancakes, I guess. Okay. But I remember like I kept samples to like show the judges
Did you offer
impact.
Tasters?
No, because they were old. And I remember, here comes a gross, skip this folks if you're easily grossed out. But when I moved on to like the next level of science fair project, there weren't any good ones that year apparently. They had become moldy, and we didn't make new ones. And I had the cakes in bags.
Oh.
And so, but they looked like they were blueberry. Like they looked very blue.
That's not good.
And so all the judges were like, "Oh, they're blueberry cake." I'm like, "Yes,
that's blueberries for sure." I thought you meant when you went to the next level, the next year. And I was like, "You kept your cake for a year." No kidding. They're moldy.
No, the next year I did effects of different toothpastes on protecting eggs from like the Coke, the acid in Coke.
Whoa.
To test like how
like
toothpaste
Coca-Cola
protect and how whitening toothpaste eroded.
So you'd put eggs in Coca-Cola.
It was insane. I had a whole fridge filled with eggs. I had controls. I had so many iterations.
Good scientist.
I had 9 toothpastes. Anyway,
that's amazing.
We'll save that for a special episode.
My science fair project was static electricity.
But it wasn't experimental?
There was no theory.
See,
it was just the explanation.
experimental.
Yeah, I didn't do any experiments.
Wow. It's still great.
It's information. I learned something.
That's fantastic. Yeah. We all learned.
We all just learned.
Real.
Good.
Thank you. Well, we have facts. Those weren't even our facts.
Those were just personal science fair stories.
Personal science fair stories. That's a whole other podcast. I would love to. Oh my gosh.
That's what I would listen to that. Personal science for kids remembering your science fair project.
Well, we'll have to ask our guest today if they had a science fair project.
Sure.
Not all provinces do that, it seems. Yeah. Oh yeah. Okay. We got something good. All right. So science facts. Who wants to go first?
I can go first.
Go.
I got a good one.
Do it.
All right. Well, Katie, what do you know about sharks?
I heard a wild anecdote the other day that salmon are more closely related to us than they are to sharks.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That is wild.
Yeah.
Wild salmon.
If you think about like when the lineage of sharks and bony fishes diverged versus us and bony fishes.
Salmon are closer.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess I feel more kinship with the salmon. I mean, I eat salmon, but I don't eat shark.
For those reasons. You only eat your kin?
It depends how close they are. There's a line which is too close, I won't eat. And as long as it's too far, again, I won't eat.
Too strange.
Yeah. That's why I don't eat plants.
Or bacteria.
Or any archaea, nothing.
No. Okay. Sorry. What's your shark fact?
So sharks are quite old.
Yeah.
They're very, very old. Now, the fossil record indicates that sharks first evolved 450 million years ago. And I was reading about this and thinking, like, that's a very long time ago. But I also learned two other facts that kind of like put it into context in a way that I really didn't imagine. So let me ask you this, Katie.
Oh, boy.
Which came first, sharks or the North Star?
Oh, stop it. Sharks?
Sharks came before the North Star.
Wow.
The North Star formed approximately 70 million years ago. Sharks appeared 450 million years ago by like a factor of 5 or 6 by 6.
Oh my gosh.
Now here's another one.
Okay.
Saturn's rings. How old do you think they are? Are they older than sharks, older than a North Star, or younger?
This is our new game show. Is it older than a shark? Saturn's rings are the baby birds here. They're the youngest of the three.
How many million years do you think they are?
They've been around, the Saturn's rings?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. 100 million years.
Correct. 100 million years.
Oh, what did I win?
You win a shark. We have one here for you.
We'll eat it.
So the North Star only formed 70 million years ago. Saturn's rings predates the North Star 100 million years ago.
Wow.
And sharks are 400. They're like massively older than both of those things.
That is fascinating. Yeah, when you put biological events on the scale of
astronomical events, you don't often get to compare it, but sharks are old.
Yeah, and they're still kicking around. I gotta respect that.
I gotta respect it. Yeah. If you don't respect it, you get bit by one.
Yeah, it's crazy. They barely have any bones, right? They're mostly
cartilage.
Cartilage. That's
just like Saturn's rings.
I did not know.
Yeah, it's space cartilage.
I thought they were all bone.
No bone.
Cartilage.
Saturn cartilage. Yeah. A planet basically blew up to form Saturn's rings, and they'll disappear one day too. They're eroding.
Oh.
They collide with each other. They get absorbed by the planet. Things knock into them.
Wow.
It's amazing. We're here to see them.
Here for a good time, not a long time.
Saturn's rings. So that's my science fact.
That's
just
very
like a
cool.
bunch of comparative timelines that I don't normally get to see together.
That's awesome and timely for me because I teach vertebrate evolution as of next week. So I'm gonna throw in those anecdotes.
Go for it.
Not just a fact, but fodder. Fodder for school for me. Great. Oh my gosh, is it me now?
It is you.
Is that how this works?
One me, one you.
Okay, Vinny.
Katie.
How are gametes made?
Gametes are made in the gamete factory.
For humans, how do we make our sex cells?
Well, I think women are born with their ova, or at least they form very early. The number of cells that become ova are kind of fixed at birth, is what I've learned. And maybe I'm wrong. And then testes produce semen on a regular basis.
On the reg.
So
true-ish. So meiosis. The way we make sperm and eggs, right? You start with a cell that is like for visually like all of our other cells in terms of what their contents are. They can undergo this process where they do a double division. So you start with one, divides once into two, those two divide again into four.
Okay.
So egg-making individuals, you are born with them at a certain level in meiosis, but not ova. Ova particularly means like end product, haploid, viable egg. This is early in the process where it frees, when it's called an oocyte or an oocyte.
Uh-oh.
Anyway, so true-ish. But those cells that sort of start the process, they can make more copies of themselves, or they can make cells that are going to divide to become our sex cells.
Okay.
So what's happening in you, if we take you for example, right?
Me specifically. We have a live camera.
You are... I was going to zoom in to your gonads, with your permission.
Sure.
Right? You're making sperm all the time.
Can't help it.
So why is it then, if you have a baby and your sperm fertilizes an egg, that baby doesn't gain the age of your sex cells?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Because, cells age.
Well, you're producing them. You're dividing them.
Oh, that's true.
They should age in terms of their chromosomes.
Do meiosis division not age cells? Because mitosis division does.
Yeah.
But does meiosis?
Yeah.
It also ages.
So it's a limitation of having linear chromosomes.
Oh.
That every time you make a copy of it, you can't copy the ends, and so they get shorter and shorter, and that sort of instigates aging.
And so do the gametes, these cells or these sex cells, get shorter with the reproduction?
Yes,
wow.
Correct. So why don't babies look all wrinkly?
They're just, the water's different, like a pruny fingers.
So a recent study came out that showed, and I mean, this is above my pay grade, understanding this, how they do this, but they were able to show that early embryos for both mice, they saw this in mice and then they saw it as well in humans.
Okay.
At a certain stage early in embryonic development, the clock resets.
Whoa.
Yeah. So you have like an old sperm and an old, that was my old sound.
Sure.
Old egg.
All
they
right.
have aged relative to the individuals.
Right.
Fertilize, moves to the uterus.
Right.
Starts growing. Clock resets.
Clock
That's my baby sound.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That makes perfect sense. It was a baby.
Isn't that cool?
So how does this clock reset?
Well, that's the big question, right? Because there's all sorts of health issues related to the aging process and diseases that hasten it. And if we could find a way to
reset the clock,
that'd
be good.
On our other cells. Well, I mean, we need to die eventually,
true. We
right?
can't all stay here forever. It's not good.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Anyway, cool though.
That is cool.
Right?
So these cells, they get basically a reset.
Yeah. They go to a spa and they get...
in the fallopian tube.
Yeah. The fallopian
spa.
Mm-hmm. Actually, uterine tube.
Oh, no longer.
Well...
Because it was named after a guy, wasn't it? It was named after a guy.
Because having parts of genitalia named for people is
not
weird.
Cool. Yeah. We don't need that.
Don't need that. Don't put your mark there.
What about Jennifer lungs?
They're going to change them to airbags. Yeah, lungs. Yeah,
the internal airbags.
Sorry, Jen.
Nice.
Sorry, Jen.
Wow, that's a great fact. That's really cool. Wow,
facts. Bringing it today.
I hope they figure out what's going on there.
Yeah, before we keep aging.
Yeah.
Please.
Or we start having old babies.
There's no problem with that. We're not going to do that.
Though.
Okay.
It could happen.
Now you're paranoid about old babies.
I'm worried about old babies.
Okay. Well, with that,
yes.
With that end of that tomfoolery, we have a guest.
I love guests.
Oh my gosh. It's the best part of the show.
Can't wait to meet them.
Oh my gosh. So our guest this week is Em Lim. Em Lim is a non-binary Masters of Science student in the Department of Biology. Nice. At Simon Fraser University, their research examines the role of marine animals in cycling nutrients. Ooh. And they're especially passionate about sea cucumbers. Yes, please. Em is an avid scuba diver, and a lot of their work takes place underwater. Thanks for joining us on dry land, Em.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for joining us. Wow, this is exciting.
Yeah.
I see your hat. Is that in reference to the Bamfield Marine Station?
Yeah, so I worked out in Bamfield for quite a while. So it's the Bamfield Marine Sciences Center. I actually did school there. Well, first I went out there on a field trip, and then I went back to do some research, and then I went back to take a bunch of classes, and then I convinced them to hire me, and I stayed there for 2 more years.
Whoa!
And then when they thought they'd gotten rid of me, I started my master's, and I just stayed in Bamfield, and I did all my research there. And so I actually just moved to Vancouver, and I'm sure the Science Center is going, oh, they're here forever.
Enough of them.
They finally got the message. They need to move on.
But then they sent me this hat to remind me.
So you always take a piece of them with you.
Yeah, it's very sweet.
I've met so many people who've gone through the Bamfield Sciences Center. They have like a great summer program for students and a field course, and like everyone who goes there shouts its praises.
What's there?
Field stations are a thing in
Okay.
ecology, where like for example, I did some research in Alberta. I stayed at a field station. It's sort of a hub for research in a park in an area that has equipment and places to stay and facilities and lab space sometimes and all that sort of stuff.
Very neat.
Yeah, it's a weird setup. They're both a nonprofit and also a remote campus of like 5 member universities. So they're kind of like straddling the world of like nonprofit and also being kind of a university. It's really, really unique.
So marine animals, and you're big into sea cucumbers. Do you want to just talk about sea cucumbers a bit? What's up with them?
Yes, I love talking about sea cucumbers. So if you've never seen a sea cucumber, I want you to picture a normal sea cucumber. And then in your mind, I want you to add some spikes to it, some little spikes.
Nice.
And I want you to imagine the whole thing is made out of really squishy jelly.
Ooh.
That is kind of what a sea cucumber feels like. The spikes are fake. They're not actually that painful, but they're animals that are closely related to sea stars and things like sea urchins. And they just crawl around on the bottom of the ocean, and they eat poo, and they eat dead stuff, and they eat just anything that's rotting. And then they pee and poo it back out, and it kind of recycles it into the environment. So they're very important.
They're like the worms of the sea.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of similar functions to earthworms. I want to tell you about their bums really quickly.
Please. I was about to go there.
Perfect. So you and I, hopefully you as well, breathe out of our mouth and our noses. I know I do. Sea cucumbers actually breathe out of their bums. Their breathing structures are located in their anus. And sometimes fish in the tropics will actually live in their bums as well. Little pearl fish. And if you freak them out and you grab them and they're threatened, they will expel their internal organs out of their butt at you to try to scare you away. And then they crawl off and grow them back later. So they can breathe, they can scare things, and they can let other animals live in there.
Whoa. So that's like an ejection button. Like, emergency, release internal organs.
Yep.
There needs to be some horror movies about like giant sea cucumbers.
It would be like if someone threatened me and then just like my intestines, my heart, my liver just flew out my butt.
Yeah, you turn around, you pull your pants down, and it just all shoots right out at them.
It's aggressive. That's a big move.
That's a power move.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Have you witnessed that?
I've never seen it happening. I've seen the aftermath. Sometimes one will get really stressed in a tank or something, and you'll just come back the next day and there's kind of like a little pile of organs. The weird thing is that you can't tell who did it. Like if there's a bunch of them in the tank, they're all still crawling around. They all fine. You have no idea which one of them eviscerated itself.
Wow.
So they're just living without their organs, or they regrow them instantly?
No, they regrow them over a couple months. They actually do it. The ones we have in British Columbia, they do it every single winter. They just lose all their internal organs and they kind of just hang out, hunker down, weather the storm, and then they grow them back in the spring.
Wow, pretty overrated, those internal organs.
Yeah.
Would we, I know there's a bit of a leap, but if that happened to us, would we be okay?
No. No, we would be dead if we farted out. If I farted out my internal organs, I would not be talking on this podcast anymore.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Now, I was going to ask you eventually, like, how you got into sea cucumbers, but I think you explained it.
I mean, I'm into them now.
They're incredibly badass.
Do you not want to do another graduate degree in sea cucumbers, having heard that? No, actually, it's a fun story. I was an undergrad, and I was helping a PhD student. We were doing, like, oyster research, and we were out on an oyster farm, out on low tide, and they put up these little mesh nets to kind of keep predators out, and there was a sea cucumber stuck in the net. And I was like, oh, cool. And like walked over and picked it up. And I just started crying. And I was just holding this thing in my hands. And I just like through these tears went, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my whole life. And even telling the story, like I wish you could see viewers at home, because I do tear up a little bit. They're just so wonderful. And I was like, this is the animal I want to study. Mm-hmm. This guy right here, this little sack.
That's so incredible.
Somebody's got to love them.
So who eats sea cucumbers? Where do they fit in the? So they recycle a bunch of stuff, but who eats them?
Someone's got to eat a sea cucumber.
Yeah, that's a great question. There's not a ton of things that eat them. Sea otters actually will. I don't think it's not their preferred food. Like they like urchins a lot. You know, they like clams, crab. But there's been some places up in Alaska where they reintroduced sea otters, and just like that, 100% mortality of the sea cucumbers.
Whoa.
So
No.
obviously, like they will eat them. Sunflower stars and like predatory sea stars will also eat them. So there's a really fun thing. If you touch a sea cucumber with one of these predatory stars, the sea cucumber almost, when people break dance and they do the worm, the sea cucumber will do a very similar motion. It's called galloping. It looks more like flailing, but they obviously don't like it, and they try to get away from whatever's touching them. So that's kind of how we know that these sea stars will also eat them.
Wow.
I mean, it seems crazy that an otter would choose to eat something that seems like it takes more effort, right? You have to chip away all those shells to eat that stuff. Why wouldn't you go for the squishy thing? Are they poisonous, sea cucumbers, or
not the cold water ones? There's some in the tropics that the guts they spit out at you will actually hurt you. But The ones we have here, I mean, some people eat the whole thing, but like I've eaten them before. I'll go free diving for them. I kind of pretend I'm an otter when I do it, and I, swim underwater and I find one and I put it on my chest. But there's 5 strips of muscle inside of them that kind of run the length of the sea cucumber. And that's really the only part that I want to eat. Okay. So I'm not really sure if the otters enjoy the whole sea cucumber, or if they're kind of also just looking for those strips of muscle. So maybe they're not really harmful, but maybe there's just not a lot of good meat in there.
Huh, interesting. So what you got to tell us, because I don't think we're going to eat it.
Not likely.
What is it? Did you eat it raw? Did you barbecue it? How did it?
Yeah, so I wouldn't eat them raw. What I do is I flash fry them. So the way you clean them, you basically cut the head and the tail off, and then all of the guts just fall out. So you just have this kind of empty tube.
They're barely hanging on in there.
Yeah, exactly. They're
out real easy.
Attached. And then you've got this tube. So you cut the tube up the side, and then you've got basically like a sheet of paper with these 5 strips. And then I just fry the strips in a frying pan. They taste almost like it's like calamari mixed with clam. Kind of delicate, kind of mild, seafoody, a little chewy. It's pretty good.
Nice. Well, now I know.
Coming to menus near you.
Oh, we don't need to eat anything else in the sea.
No, they're pretty overexploited in a lot of places. I was only eating them when I was on the island, and there's no commercial fishery where I lived, and there's only like a few of us that free dove. So we were like, we're not taking too many.
Are they being exploited for food?
Yeah, there's a big market for them in Asia. They're pretty prized items. Lots of fisheries, specifically in the tropics, that are getting hit pretty hard. And one of my lab mates actually is studying the sustainability of fisheries in British Columbia right now. And the jury's kind of out on that one right now.
Sea cucumber.
Who knew?
We're too devoury as a species.
Devoury?
Yeah, we eat too many things.
I mean, there's been movements before for getting people to eat invasive species as a means of...
That's a great solution.
Well, sometimes they're not necessarily things that are palatable to the people of that area, and that's tricky. True. Yeah, we're picky and exploitative of the things we do enjoy at the same time.
So, Em, why don't you tell us a little bit about your research?
Yeah, so I feel like I hinted at it a bit earlier with the cucumbers. They eat all this stuff and they metabolize it just like us. They pee out all their waste products and they poop out all the poop. And those waste products from humans aren't very nutritious for seaweeds and plants, but marine animals, fish and all your invertebrates like your sea cucumbers and your hermit crabs, their pee is actually really nutritious. It's like a fertilizer. And so I'm kind of trying to figure out how important all that pee is for things like kelp forests or plankton, anything in the ocean that's trying to do the same role that plants do. So they take light and other things and they produce sugars. So kind of trying to figure out how important pee is, basically. Pee is what I do.
And how is their pee what's different about their pee? I'm jealous now. Why is their pee?
Yeah, what's so great about
Why
their
is it so much more nutritious? Come on.
Yeah, so it has to do with just the form that the nutrients are in. So, we've got like things like nitrogen and potassium like in bananas, just things that you want that are important for your body. But the way that our bodies process those nutrients, we pee them out in kind of a different form. Okay. So it's a slightly different chemical. It's still nitrogen, but it's just less available to plants. Whereas sea cucumbers and fish, their pee is exactly the form that these seaweeds really want. They can just slurp it right up and use it immediately to grow.
No processing needed. Organic, fully locally sourced.
So why is it different? Do we know that? Like, what is it about the metabolism or the food that's in the water? Like, why is it different?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I don't know the answer. I would guess that it's just something to do with the way that our bodies metabolize these products. We've got a very fancy system that's designed to get rid of waste. Sea cucumbers, they're actually not like stopping and taking a little pee. Their body is just constantly letting off this ammonium is what it's called. So it's coming off their body. It's not really getting processed the same way that ours is.
I tried that once. I don't recommend it.
It's almost like us, like if we sweated our pee off our bodies.
Oh, interesting. Huh. That's an interesting analogy.
Hot take.
Yeah, I'm glad we don't as well.
Let's not. Evolution, if you're listening.
No, thank you.
No thanks.
Hard pass.
Hard pass. Oh, wow. Cool. So are you sort of early on in the process, Em, or do you have any sort of results for what pea's up to? What are the pea consequences?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I just finished a big summer of field research out at Banfield. And what I was doing was trying to figure out where the pea is. So I was diving kind of all over Vancouver Island out in Barkley Sound and taking samples of water and trying to figure out like if some areas that have lots of fish and lots of animals, if those areas had more pea. And I kind of found that there were these little hot spots in these reefs that had lots and lots of animals. And so then I planted kelp. I like tied it onto ropes and hung it off buoys. So I planted these kelps in these really high pea areas and some low pea areas. And then we found that they actually grew a lot faster when there was a lot of pea in the water. That was really cool to find. So more animals equals more pea equals faster kelp growth.
Unbelievable.
And so you're measuring the kelp growth, I guess, by like size and volume and mass?
I'm actually using the only hole punch on the entire campus of BMSC, which I found out because the other guy who was trying to measure kelp and I had to fight over it. But what I do is you punch a hole in the blade of the kelp, and then you measure how far that hole is away from the stipe, which is like the stem. And then the kelp that I was using, it kind of just grows in one direction. And so then in another week, you can measure that same hole to the stipe and it'll actually be further away. And so as the hole kind of travels, almost like a conveyor belt, farther and farther away from where the new growth is getting put down.
That's amazing.
That is so cool. That is not, I guess because kelp can get like really big. You don't want to be like breaking it off and taking it back to weigh it in the lab and killing it, right? If you want to protect the kelp, that's really neat.
Yeah. And this method, like I was transplanting it, so it did have to like go on the boat for a while, but you can just have a kelp that's growing in the wild and clip a little tiny hole in it and just come back later. So you don't even have to take it out of the water if you wanted to do this.
Oh, it's just like fin clipping for fish.
Yeah.
To do that to quantify
Putting
them.
little rings on a bird's leg. And do you have like different hole patterns for different kelp, or does it not really matter?
No, I was just punching one hole and just trying to make sure it's far enough from the edge that it's not going to tatter. Because the fish would swim like right into my kelp. Like we had this one, it's an endangered rockfish, and I swear it was the same fish, but every week we'd come back and it would just be like sitting on my kelp and we'd be like, hey, careful.
Yeah.
Like, yes, good, pee on it, but like, be careful, please.
Do your business, then go, rockfish.
Yeah.
Did you try putting up a little sign with like a picture of a rockfish with an X through it?
No, we more had to warn the local community, like, hey, leave these buoys alone, don't pull them up. We had some spearfishers, and I was like, you stay away from my kelp.
They'll poke extra holes.
I know, exactly. Like, wow, this one grew so much.
The hole grew too.
Oh, wow. So you scuba dive for your research. Were you already a scuba diver before you got into research, or did you get into research and say, I better learn how to scuba dive to look at these cucumbers?
Well, so I learned how to scuba dive kind of in between my undergrad and my master's. I was working as a research assistant. I actually got hired by a PhD student at UBC to grow bacteria in tanks. And right before I was starting, she called me and said, do you know how to scuba dive? And I said, no. She said, well, would you maybe want to learn? And I said, okay. And her whole PhD had changed, and we were in Vancouver at the time, and we ended up learning how to dive and getting our scientific diving certificate in a month. And then we moved out to northern remote Quebec in James Bay. And we spent a whole summer surveying eelgrass in this really cool Cree community. So it was just a whirlwind learning experience.
Wow.
But yeah, way cooler than bacteria in a tank. I was very happy.
Yeah.
What a big change.
Yeah, absolutely.
And have you gone like scuba diving for like leisure in like shipwrecks or other like kind of more tropical locales perhaps?
I've never been warm water diving. It sounds very cool. I wear a really big bulky dry suit and like fleece and wool and all of the layers. I'm like 34 pounds of lead to try to like submerge all that wool and dry suit. So I do definitely do some fun dives. I have a camera, so I like to take photos of things. And
very cool.
I'm pretty obsessed with this citizen science or community science website called iNaturalist.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like Pokemon Go for nerds. So you can just take photos of all the things that you see, plants, animals, mushrooms, and you upload them to this website, and fellow nerds help you identify them. And there's some like leaderboards, so you can get kind of competitive with like how many fish. So I dive mostly for that.
And I gotta ask, have you seen a sea cucumber on your dives?
Yeah, I actually saw a new to me sea cucumber last week. My supervisor, who's another amazing sea cucumber researcher, and I were out, and we're just like giving each other these what the F looks through our masks and looking at this thing and looking at each other like, and it was a albatross footless sea cucumber. And someone on iNaturalist helped us identify it because we both went, I don't know what this is. So that was really exciting. It was like the size of my thumbnail. It was very small.
Whoa. Well, that was a full-grown sea cucumber.
No, it was a baby.
It was a baby.
Really cute. And they're so squishy too. Like a little jelly bean.
How big do sea cucumbers like the ones you work on get?
That's a great question. They get pretty big. The species is called the giant California sea cucumber. And I was weighing them for my research, and we actually had to find a new scale at one point because I think our biggest one was 2 kilograms. And that's including water weight. You know, they have a lot of water inside their bodies, but 2 kilograms of sea cucumber, they're pretty big.
That's
I'd say
wild.
Like if you made a fist, you know, roughly the distance from your fist to your elbow and like a bit bigger is kind of the size range you're looking at. They're big. They're really big.
Nuts.
I didn't know they got that big.
Yeah, I figured they'd be itty bitties too.
I mean, things get big in the ocean because of their buoyancy. Look at whales.
Whales are very big.
Whales are very big.
They pee a lot.
I bet. Oh man, I can only imagine.
The poo clouds off whales. That's someone's whole job, is to follow whales around and like wait for them to poop and then scoop up some of that poop in a bucket. I'm not joking.
I don't want that job.
I read that paper.
It'd be awkward to be just like leisurely scuba diving and come across that. Someone's right up against a whale's butt with a shovel.
Waiting for the innards to be expelled. It's like, no, only sea cucumbers.
Only they can get away with that madness.
No sea mammals doing that.
So what are some cool things you've seen scuba diving for your research? Do you have any fun scuba discoveries or scuba stories?
Oh man, my dive buddy and I dropped in, this is a couple months ago, and the first thing we saw was what it was probably a whale fin that had been half eaten.
Whoa.
And so first of all, you're like, wow, this is so cool. You know, it's covered in crabs. They're all picking away at the meat. But then you start looking around a little bit because you're thinking, well, where's the rest of the whale? And what ate this whale?
Mm-hmm.
And luckily we didn't end up seeing, you know, anything big or scary, but it's a little spooky sometimes to find these like carcasses.
No kidding. Are we sure the whale didn't get scared and shot off its tail? Now I'm worried about this.
Can't rule it out.
Yeah, I can't rule it out. It's like what are those things that shoot quills? Porcupines.
Yeah.
They don't really shoot them out though. That's very dramatic.
What, they walk up to you and gently insert them like acupuncture?
They sort of release them.
What, they just fall off?
Yeah, they like poke you.
I thought they shoot them.
No, that's not a thing. That's not a thing.
I wish it was now.
I know. It's much more dramatic.
Well, animals shoot things. We're the cool animals.
Some lizards shoot blood out of their eyes. That's pretty cool.
There you go. Thank you.
Really goth lizard right there.
That's real emo. That's an emo move.
Yeah, it's an emo move.
Yeah.
I just want to talk about sea cucumbers all day.
I know. Now, what is it about the relationship between sea cucumbers and pee that you're like, oh, I'm really hoping this is the reality? Or like, what are the applications of this, if any? Is it just like, I need to know how this works?
Yeah, I got into it just for a pure love of sea cucumbers, but the more I read about just, you know, the research on nutrient cycling, there's this assumption that it doesn't matter in cold water. And that's because a lot of our nutrients in the ocean up in Canada, it's through upwelling. So basically rich nutrients and rich water from deeper areas kind of comes up and helps supplement all the upper water areas. But there's this assumption that, basically with this upwelling, the animal pee is it's not really important anymore. And so I really think that those sea cucumbers are doing something out there. And I think all these fish and all that nutrients is really helpful. And so I'm kind of hoping that if I can show that, kelps are really positively influenced by having lots of animals around, that we'll kind of appreciate them a little bit more. And maybe we'll put a bit more work into trying to protect some of these species that, most people hear that I research sea cucumbers and think they're kind of silly and that they're not that important, but all these animals are really important. And I kind of like to show how important this pea is in British Columbia and in these cold waters.
That's fascinating because,
cool.
Yeah, all of these nutrients exist in the environment and they affect one another and they affect the animals that can and will live there, and everything's so interconnected, right? Like the idea of a food web, there's so many pieces to that food web that maybe we don't know about.
Yeah, and I think like the way that pea, I'm going to say, acts in cold water is actually quite different than how it acts in warm water. And that's just because in the tropics, there's not a lot of nutrients, the water's really clear. And so if a fish pees, the seaweeds and the corals and the plankton very quickly suck up that pee. So you don't really get the same cloud if you would imagine a nice pea cloud, because it's just sucked up so quickly, versus up here in the cold water, there's a lot of nutrients. And so you kind of get the pea kind of sloshing around a little bit more, and it's kind of hanging out in the system a bit longer. So I think the way that we ask a lot of our questions with how important pea is, the pea is behaving really differently. So you can't ask the question the same way, in a coral reef where it's just staying in one spot, versus on a rocky kelp forest where it's moving around a little bit more.
Not all pee is created equal.
No.
That's what I always say.
Think about when you're in the
say
pool and you pee and it's moving around. It's dispersing. It's not just affecting you. All your fellow swimmers are now swimming around in your.
Who is spreading rumors about me peeing in pools? That's what I want to know.
That was me. It was me. Sorry.
Vinny, one time.
Hey,
one time.
I gotta warn everybody.
The kelp forests like it. Why can't you?
All right. So now, Em, what do you notice is, like, one of the things we like to talk about here on this podcast is what is it like as a grad student, and what are maybe some of the changes going from like undergrad to more advanced grad levels that you've noticed?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed grad school. I took a break between my undergrad and my master's, and I worked for a while, and I really liked that. I really approached my degree as a job. As a science student, I get a small stipend to kind of help support my rent and my food. And so, I have a thing that I'm supposed to go do and work on it every day, and I get paid. So I think, yeah, this is a job. And I think that's really different in undergrad. It feels more like school. It's kind of more like an extension of high school. But I found, maintaining like some kind of work-life balance has been a lot easier when I treat it like an employment opportunity. So I go to work at 9 o'clock. I do my day, have lunch, chit chat a little bit, and then I go home, and then I'm done. And I don't have to think about all this stuff for the rest of my weekend. So I really like that.
Yeah,
grad school is also just a fun way to like get curious, and I get to kind of do whatever I want most of the day. I mean, I have to make progress in my thesis, but otherwise, like, there's not really someone looking over my shoulder making sure I'm working on one thing all the time.
Yeah. And do you know what you want to do after your master's? Do you think you want to stay in academia? Or are you just looking for any job that'll hire you to stay close to the cucumbers? What do you think is next for Em?
Oh boy. So this is a terrifying question. I think going to roll up and actually do a PhD. I have not told anyone this. So I will now have to tell my supervisor this before the podcast comes out.
Sure.
We've had a lot of
exclusive.
We've had a lot of conversations about it. She knows I'm thinking about it, but I kind of decided actually like yesterday, like, yeah, this is pretty fun. I could continue this for a bit longer.
And
so, I think I'm going to keep doing it.
Congrats.
A very amazing choice to do. That's awesome. And I just also wanted to explain to people who may not be familiar with this, often when people are in grad school doing a master's degree, sometimes you can stop and just get your master's, or you can convert it into part of your PhD. And so it becomes all one big program, but you don't get your master's.
Yeah. And I swore that I would never do this. I really wanted to do a master's first, get the experience. It's less of a commitment. It's only 2-3 years versus like 5 to 7. I said, I'd just do the master's. I'm just going to do the master's, and then I'm going to do a PhD in something different. But I really love my advisor. We've got a really good relationship, and I'm really enjoying the work I'm doing. And I just, I can't believe they got me. I said it wouldn't happen. I feel like I've got a really good system right now. So I don't really want to leave this and kind of take a gamble on a different program that I might not do as well in.
Yeah, that sounds like a smart decision. You thought about it.
Yeah, especially if you have a good relationship with the advisor, because that's not always the case.
Yeah,
Tricky.
and that's a big reason why I chose. I'm working with Dr. Isabel Cote, and she's got a really good reputation for being a really good mentor, and that's a big reason why I joined her lab. I wanted not just to receive that incredible mentorship, but also to learn how to do that for other students. So it's a really important relationship to have in your life. It's a good advisor, student, supervisor relationship.
Yeah, underrated. Sure. People always seem to be focused on like the institution, like the reputation of the school, which doesn't matter nearly as much. I mean, you're going to thrive if you get along well with your supervisor and it's a good working environment for you, right? It's a good pairing and a good setup. That's going to make you work your best. And then that'll sort of supersede, I think, the project, the place, everything else.
Yeah, exactly. And I think especially, so I'm non-binary, which basically for anyone who's not aware of that, it means that I don't identify as a woman or a man. It's not really like a third thing. It's just its own thing. It's kind of hard to explain sometimes how I feel about it, but yeah, not in the traditional man-woman binary. And, some people are very understanding of that. And some people not so much. So that's definitely a consideration, I think, for me, especially with choosing a supervisor, because I want to find someone who's not just okay with it,
right?
But actually enthusiastic about supporting me in this capacity. And Isa is really great with this stuff, and I get to talk to her about if I have a bad day and someone uses the wrong pronouns for me, she's really sympathetic. And yeah, I think that to me is really important, and that's a part of our relationship that I really cherish.
Nice.
It's amazing.
And you mentioned to us, Em, that you're really involved in like inclusion and diversity initiatives. Do you want to talk about that, the need for that, and sort of what your role is in that area?
Yeah, so at SFU in the biology department, we've got a diversity and inclusion committee of grad students. And I've only joined more recently in the last year, but they've been pushing for a scholarship basically for Black and Indigenous students and people of color. And they've just been fighting tooth and nail for this scholarship. It seems like a no-brainer to establish this kind of thing, but there's a lot of red tape and paperwork and rules. And yeah, it's the fundraiser has finally launched. So we're trying to raise funds to establish this scholarship. And, I think in biology, those of us in sciences can look around the room and realize that there's not always the most diverse representation of our population. And, Black and Indigenous and people of color are definitely one of those groups that are not super well represented. And it's not because they don't like science. It's not because they're not smart. It's because there's often a lot of barriers kind of keeping them specifically out. So I think establishing a scholarship is just a small step on the way to helping erase, some of those barriers, maybe financial, for example.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Seems like there's a lot of universities, and even within SFU, a lot of different departments are trying to establish their own scholarships of this nature.
Nice. That's awesome. See. Yeah.
Better once they're out in the world and actually doing good, but
have to start somewhere.
You gotta start somewhere.
It's such a hard problem too, because it's propagated by if you look around the room at who the professors are, right? And if you don't see yourself represented there, but that you have to fix that at the earlier levels. And it's going to take, it's a legacy change. It's a culture change that needs to happen to get that up to those higher levels.
Yeah. And it was really cool when I was working out at the Marine Center in Bamfield. I was teaching field trips. And so basically high schools would send their students out and we'd take them on the boat and we teach them about seaweed and all sorts of things. But almost every class had a student that was either queer or trans or a person of color. And, I'd write my name, Em Lim, they, them up on the board, and they'd be like, oh, whoa, I'm non-binary. I didn't know that you could be a teacher and be non-binary. This really, touching to work with the youth and to see them, visualizing themselves in your position, because there's so few people that I'm able to look up to in that capacity. So it's cool to kind of be that for the next generation. And they're just so keen, they want to be here. They're trying to be here.
I think it's super underestimated, the impact of seeing yourself be represented somewhere. Like just that is a huge step for people, and for, as you say, solving the problem, which is getting the next generation of people interested in being like, oh, there is a place at the table for me. And if I don't see myself there in any way, then it's like, oh, that's not for me. I'm not, the unspoken message, and not by necessarily any intention, is that, that I'm not wanted there. I'm not welcome there for whatever reason, because I don't see myself there. And I think it's super important to get that representation. And it's the challenge is and this is something I have to kind of try and solve too in my own like improv comedy world, which is this underrepresentation of so many different communities, and it's not on just sitting back and being like, oh, I hope it happens, or I hope it like you have to be really proactive about it. You have to reach out and invite people in and make those connections with communities, and be very make a conscious decision and a conscious effort to reach out to people. So it's awesome to hear that that's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. I still remember the first queer PhD student I met. She had this glorious undercut and her hair was dyed blue, and she was in the lab talking about like going to the Pride Parade, and I was just like in awe in the corner, like, whoa, like, oh my God. And she was so well respected. And her name's Kat Anderson. We actually organized a queer meetup at a conference this summer together, and that was really cool.
Awesome.
You're kind of my hero.
That's amazing. I remember reading a stat like not that long ago that in the history of the United States, there have been or I think just recently, more than 100 Black women who have gotten PhDs in physics, just in the physics department. But yeah, in the history, 100, which blows my mind.
The research group that I'm part of, the labs it's like this 5-lab group. There's more Johns than people of color.
Right.
Oh, wow.
It's rough.
Oof.
They're both really nice guys.
Oh yeah, I mean it's not their fault.
Yeah.
Johns, we see you. You're okay.
You're still valid.
Yeah.
But we've heard plenty from Johns.
So that's always a challenge for sure.
Yeah. Well, you got to work with a hero, and I have no doubt you are going to be plenty of students' hero.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
You're our hero, our sea cucumber hero.
Yeah, just don't shoot out your intestines.
Yeah.
That's my request.
I make no promises.
All right, fair.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And Em, before we let you go, can you let us know a bit about what little Em was like? You seem like you were a delight, but like, were you into science as a kid? What were you like?
Oh, I was just talking about this weekend. I just remembered this Halloween that when I was a kid, I would get home with my candy and I would dump it on the floor and I would make little bar graphs based on the frequency of each kind of candy. And I was like, oh my God, I've always been like this.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's a snapshot, my poor parents.
That is great. Did you have error bars on those bar graphs, Em?
Oh, I wasn't there yet. I think I was making the graphs like out of the candy themselves.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
I mean, biology and classification go hand in hand.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yep.
I wonder if your parents saw that and were like, well, I know scientists on our hands. That is fantastic. Well, Em, this has been a true delight.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been really fun.
Thank you so much for being here. Good luck on your soon-to-be PhD. We'll make sure that we don't release this until that has been disclosed to all necessary parties. But thank you so much, Em. Keep doing amazing stuff with those sea cucumbers.
Thank you.
Wow.
Oh, they were so cool.
I mean, I feel I'm overwhelmed with a sense of guilt right now because I'm one of those people Em was talking about that thought the cucumbers are just these, I'm sorry, dumb little slime balls on the ocean floor doing nothing for nobody.
Nothing for nobody, yeah.
If they all got killed by climate change, it wouldn't matter. I feel bad.
Really?
I feel bad.
Wow.
I didn't realize the role they played. The worms of the sea.
The worms of the sea. They really feel like really primitive. I mean, I wonder, they have to predate sharks for sure.
Well, Em was comparing them to starfish, so I assume they belong to Echinodermata. Yes? Yeah. So that's actually, as bizarre as those organisms seem, that's like the most closely related phylum to ours.
Okay.
Compared to all the other ones, like insects or,
Man, sea cucumbers. Well, mystery. A whole world of mysteries to unravel.
Yes, and we'll get straight to that. I'm going to go read up on sea cucumbers now.
I'm just going to go eat a cucumber.
Not from the sea.
Not from the sea.
We're
from the
calling them
fridge.
land cucumbers.
Fridge cucumbers.
Fridge cucumbers. Well, that's great. They're great facts. We learned tons.
Yeah.
Sharks, sea cucumbers.
Yeah.
And old babies.
Yeah, and shooting out your intestines. Or blood from your eyes.
Yes, wild facts.
World of nature, huh?
Yeah,
world of nature.
It is a jungle out there. Nature is metal, like the subreddit. All right, well, I think that's a great place to end. Thanks again to Em for joining us. Thank you, Vinny.
Thank you, Katie.
See you next time, folks.
If you want to find us on our socials, you can find us at LRG Pod. That's LRG Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you're interested in signing up to be one of our guests and you're a grad student, just send us an email at learnrealgoodpodcast@gmail.com. That's learnrealgoodpodcast@gmail.com.
We could record that and play it each time.
I like saying it.
Yeah, I know you do.
I get to use the pre-recorded voice.
Your radio voice, yes. All right. Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.